It's about like the American side and
The what now?
the American. So it's like just like the hyper segregation in cities across America, and especially how Baltimore is in the shape of a black butterfly. So you have
Okay.
west and east, and then like the gentrified white L that runs through. And he's been working on a mapping tool. He wanted to know if I was going to help out in the fall, which is kind of why I wanted to start getting into GIS stuff. But it's kind of an overview of like the American apartheid. So I guess racialized trauma, like throughout history, but it's gonna show different layers. So I think like the amount of like slaves at this time, as well as like lynchings and the segregated, I guess, levels. I think it's in like 3 different tiers. He kind of outlines it in the book, and just like environmentally hazardous areas, and it's just gonna overlap everything.
That sounds nifty.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm not really sure if it's gonna work, but I'm interested. So
Yeah. No, I mean, like, I would say, like, yeah, if you have an intro skills class, you'd have enough ability just to, if you understand how the interface works, that's like, you can Google the rest of it.
Oh. Yeah, totally. Also, like he said earlier, like just doing the class will help you understand the concept of what mapping is, how it works, what analysis is spatially. Because before that, I didn't have an understanding of spatial analysis at all.
Yeah.
Right.
And now I understand how to read a map, critique a map, make a faster presentation. Like I'm not a mapping expert like Ida is.
My R
but I can get
yeah, my R experience is going up to the R Shiny website, copy and pasting everything, and just changing the names around.
Hello.
Yeah, I use like this one program with R and R Studio, and then my biology class, and I was dying. I was like, this is like the worst thing I've ever had to do.
You have to like kind of rewire your mind
Yeah.
to kind of make it all make sense, and then you have to remember that if you have a bug, 9 times out of 10 you put a typo. Missed comma.
One period.
There's a reason they call it a programming language, because you're like learning.
Yeah, it is. It is a whole other language.
Yeah, it was like online, like during COVID, and I was like, oh my god, I was, like you miss one letter and the whole line, you can't run it.
I really want to learn a little bit of coding, or like at least R, because so many jobs I've applied for, I fit all the skills except R, or like a basic preferred knowledge of Stata and R.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
Stata's terrible.
No way.
I think it's kind of like a catch-22. I think the best thing to do is learn any object-oriented language. So like if you know like C or Python. Python's the easiest, honestly.
I tried learning Python, but I didn't take the class properly at grad school, and then I just never got the chance to properly sit and do it.
There's like 1,000,001 YouTubers who do great jobs.
I know, and I've tried that, but I haven't found one dedicated way where I can just show up and.
The best way to do it is to like think of a project you want to do, and then try it. That's the best way to learn how to do Python, because you're gonna
a simple project.
Yeah. Don't do anything machine learning or with a beautiful soup or nothing like that. But like, I want to make a program that's gonna, I don't know, print out a map if I put it in a name, right? Like that's a pretty Google. You could Google how to do that.
Make a census map.
Yeah.
Do you have a GIS or a?
Yeah, I'm an R person, so I'm like, just soaking it up.
No, but anyways, any object-oriented language, the benefits of that is that while the kind of like the phrasing changes between different languages, the concepts are all the same.
Right.
So you have a variable, you can do things to those variables, and those variables are either within a program or they're within the whole, the subsection of a function or within the whole program. Like, that's the entirety of it, right? And then it's just like, do you name your variables with an equal sign or a var or an arrow? Like it's really
zero.
Yeah, right. Like it's all basically the same. It's just super frustrating sometimes.
It's 2 actually. I was wondering what to do.
I mean, we can get started. We'll wait like 5 more minutes to see.
Yeah.
Were you
Can you,
downstairs?
sorry, can you?
Yeah, I mean, the other panel rooms have filled up, I think.
Okay, I think we're good.
Oh, so this is all you're gonna get.
Yeah.
That's fine.
I feel like
Personal.
we don't know, you're the only person we don't know around here, so do you
Oh.
want to introduce yourself?
But
We don't
Well-
have, you don't have to, but.
No, I'm happy to. I'm Mike Bailey, I'm a professor at Georgetown.
Okay,
My connection to the EJ is that we have something called the Environmental Impact Data Collaborative, and we're trying to bring together data sets, data resources, but then more importantly, like data tools. So like, Mapbox, and make tools available to people who maybe aren't, up to speed on R, but like do spatial mergers, spatial aggregation, mapping, lay the groundwork for.
awesome.
Anyway, I could go on, but that's what.
no, that's
Good to know, yeah. I was asking.
But so this is like, and so we want to do, we pulled in many, I don't know if we pulled in the Maryland EJSCREEN, but California EJSCREEN, the EPA EJSCREEN. We're very, very interested in EJSCREENs. In particular, one of the applications, if we just want to tease this out, would be like how we could do an EJSCREEN for a state that doesn't want to do an EJSCREEN.
Oh, yeah,
Like for Kentucky or Mississippi, where the
Yeah.
need is probably even larger than in Maryland.
definitely.
But
Yeah.
the government isn't interested. That's one of the, phase 2 projects we're interested
Interesting.
in.
And so you guys work, you guys don't work in a dedicated geography, you're kind of working on this idea generally.
Yeah, we're in the United States.
Okay.
And someday maybe international, but
Cool.
right now focused on the United States.
Awesome. Well, let's get started then.
Yeah. So
Should we just keep sitting?
I think so.
But I'll have to control the computer. Should I just bring it here? I don't think I can move it. Okay. Well, so I'm Anushi. I research at, I don't need this mic. I work with Dr. Wilson at the Center for Community Engagement, Environmental Justice and Health. And I've been leading the GIS team, also the community engagement team. And yeah, so the EJSCREEN tool is something I've been working on. We've had the tool around for a long time, but we recently tried to update the tool because the indicators have become redundant, and the data we collected has become redundant. We're trying to update it, add new indicators, and make it more, up to the mark, kind of. So, but yeah, that's my introduction.
Yeah, I'm Eli. I'm the GIS person here. I'm doing the update itself, and so I'm doing the UX, UI updates, and then also more importantly the data sourcing.
Yeah, just to be clear, this is for the state of Maryland. This
Yeah.
isn't just like for the University of Maryland.
No, it's for the
State of Maryland.
For the state of Maryland.
So it's going to be
Yes.
at the end of it's a publicly available site that actually won't be affiliated with the university. So like it's going to be hosted on the same thing. That's great.
I had a slide talking about EJSCREEN tools, but we have a small group here that knows about EJSCREEN tools, so I'm going to skip. Again, every EJSCREEN tool, like other screening tools, does a EJ score, uses a bunch of indicators, and does a whole model to create an EJ score for each census tract. Right now, the tool is a census tract level, but hopefully in the future we'll have other units of analysis. Some key features. So in the new tool 3.0, we have EJ scores. We had initially 4 domains, which were the first 4 here: health, demographic, and environmental. But we've added climate change, which is a new domain. We've added new indicators under each of these domains, rural issues, which are often missed out in EJ screening tools, children's health, segregation indices, which captures redlining issues and such, etc. Another feature, and Eli will talk about this more, is that since the way we set it up is that the data will automatically update when the data updates in the source. So like census data will just automatically update and recalculate the scoring. We're using the latest data available, we're using COVID data as well, and we're going to do a stakeholder engagement set of workshops once the tool is ready to go. Limitations, we'll get back to this a little bit more maybe as we talk, but climate change and health data was hard to find, and even if you found it, harder to compute because of the scales at which it's available and formats and such. So that was a challenge. Air quality data is not collected enough and just not accurate enough for that reason. So that is just a limitation of the tool. Some data is just old, it's just not updated. And some data is skewed because of COVID-19. Eli, you should talk about that one. But yeah, limitations. And then these are the different unit of analyses at the census level, or generally, these are the scales at which data is usually collected. for various indicators. We work at the central census tract level, specifically, which we found to be the best unit, which captures enough detail, but also, a good balance between not being too zoomed in or zoomed out, and a good population size. Methodology.
So the way we're calculating EJ score is we're not doing anything terribly new. We're taking off of the original set of original methodology from the University of California, I believe.
Yeah, Colorado screen.
Yeah, the EJSCREEN. So essentially how it works is it takes in the different indices from health, environmental, climate change, and environmental exposure. It incorporates them into or it weights them against the sensitive populations, the demographics of the area, and then that is your EJ score. So you would get, so with our methodology, we would have 4 individual scores, so each census tract would have a score for each different indice, and then a collective one, which is an amalgam of all of those, which is the total EJ score. So the data we've been using obviously is all currently all publicly available, publicly sourced data. This is really important for having the constant updates that we were mentioning earlier, so everything is up to date. As Anushi mentioned earlier, COVID-19 threw a huge wrench in data collection in this country. It has not been really updated properly since 2019. So aside from the census information, a lot of the environmental science and a lot of the health information is not up to date, which is the biggest challenge that we're going to be facing going forward. Otherwise, though, there's been a lot of work done by the CDC and NASA in particular that have made health and environmental data a lot more easily accessible. So how the EJSCREEN works is it collects the open source data from the various agencies using APIs, converts that data into the geographic layers, and then projects it. It also includes on the other side the public data collection. All of that public data is going to be sourced through another one of our EJ tools, the MyBlockCounts tool. So it's going to be a mix between both sets of information to kind of give users more context of their EJ score in general. And the whole goal of that obviously is to give citizens an ability to have informed engagement about their community with their representatives. So for the modeling, again, this was taken from the California MD EJSCREEN. Impact modeling over a geographic area can get a little wonky, mainly because of the fact that people aren't evenly dispersed in an area, for one, and for two, neither are pollutants. So the way we generalized the impact for different polluting sources is we took the centroid of each geography and then calculated the distance from each polluting source to that geography, did the inverse distance, and weighted that by the population in that geography. That is a little incomplete, as I mentioned, for the reasons that we're assuming that everybody is equally divided, but also it does not account for the combination of pollutants, which can have an increasingly negative effect to the residents in an area. So in this example here, we have it so that even though the centroid at the bottom right here is not technically, or this facility is not technically within the same tract, the distance still allows it to have an impact on the tract itself. So, talk about the indicators.
Sure, yeah.
Can we do comments now since we're
You can do it now. We can
okay,
go
like
now.
to, just because one of the things we've been reporting, this is like it's a pain to deal with.
Yeah.
Just as a side, but I'm curious, maybe talk later too, if like 2 ways, we take, that's a census tract, let's say those are census tracts, right? And then we do a population density weight on that. So then we could get like the, basically,
The
the
distribution.
green X. Like, let's say the population's all living in the southwest corner of that
Mhm.
tract. So then the weight would be, the people here aren't really that close. Versus, let's say let's say there's all farm of one city, and anyway, we weight it by population density, and then that population density is at 1 kilometer pixels, which doesn't do a lot of good in cities, but in rural areas, that's a lot of good.
That's interesting.
Anyway, it's one of the things we're experimenting with, because this comes up, actually, we're doing it in a water context, not in an air context, but it's the same problem, and it's interesting, and it's hard. Right, but there's these problems, like the problem's obvious, the solution's less obvious.
Right, that's the thing, is being able to quantify these things, because it's the environment isn't controlled, right? So being able to quantify how the impact is actually structured is really, like you said, it's really difficult. There's no good way to do it. I think that would be interesting. I do wonder, actually, because I think in cities, it's not uncommon to have highly concentrated districts. That could be.
See, it's really common in rural areas, right?
Right, it's really common in rural areas, but I'm thinking if you shrink the pixel size, it could still be, that would still require a lot of power just to get all that.
We're
data.
using someone else's pixels.
Yeah,
we're
no,
stuck
so
with
it's
the
just-
pixel
it's
size we have, but it's super interesting.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. We're a small group, so I feel like we can have side conversations. So indicators, like we said, we have roughly 5 domains. We've added new indicators in each of our domains. In terms of environmental exposure, domains are typically just pollutants, right? And how essentially like different forms of pollutants. So initially in the tool, we had PM 2.5, diesel, particulate matter, traffic proximity. We've added stuff like, adding stuff like pesticides, PM 10, PM 1, which is data that the NASA is collecting. NASA has been working on. The NASA has a working group right now, which is collecting data, more granular data on air quality and some climate change indicators, and lead risk, etc. So that's an environmental exposure domain. Environmental effects is more like facilities, and proximity, which is what we just discussed in detail. Proximity to a site. So we have, I think this is a pretty big domain. We have a ton of different facilities we've included here. This is just a small sample of the number of facilities we've gone the length of including. Incinerators, landslides, industrial, these are some of them. Because we're trying to get to energy justice and energy burden a little bit, and I think part of the goal from this is to get to that. Health. Our tool was weak on the health side originally, EJSCREEN 2.0. So in this one, we tried to make it more robust in terms of health. So we added a lot of indicators from the CDC Places dataset, which has a ton of health indicators, which are pretty very, very relevant to the EJ conversation. So this is some of that. Demographic, of course, we have, of course, the typical race, economic, etc. But we also have food deserts. We have segregation, which is, I think, something that's been an interesting addition to the tool. Energy burden, like I said, income inequality concentration index. These are some that are very, very strong indicators of segregation in the literature that we've tried to calculate in the tool. Hopefully we'll be successful, but we are trying to do that.
And did you say race?
Huh?
You do have race or you don't have race?
We have race, we have race.
The federal government doesn't. So.
Oh, yeah. Then the last one is climate change, which is a whole other domain we've added to the tool. Climate change data, like I said, has been a limitation. It's been hard to find that data and hard to compute that data. But we're trying to make it a mix of all the different possibilities under the head of climate change. So we have flooding, heat. There's a bunch of heat indicators out there. So that's something we've grappled with, is which one of the heat indicators is relevant for Maryland, which one has comprehensive data for Maryland. But it is something we're working on. For us, climate change is not just about the environmental aspect, but also the socioeconomic. We're figuring out how to navigate the resilience indicators that we're trying to include indicators of resilience. So air conditioning is one such, population with air conditioning is one such indicator of resilience in a sense. Maybe that should go in the demographic bucket at the end of the day, but there's a lot of indicators we have that we want to include in there. We're going to figure that out, but hopefully climate change will be more than just environmental. So that's the indicators, and then features.
So there is a version of the EJSCREEN that's currently up. And this is not this, actually. This is the new one. But the current version looks very similar. The improvements that we've been focusing on have been over the data collection side and making sure the data is accurate. So if you look here on the top right corner, we have the EJ features, or all the individual EJ scores. So click on each one of those domains. The domains will pop up with the individual characteristics of them, and you can kind of circle through them and see how they look as a choropleth. The next thing we have is this little filter tool, which is going to allow users to be able to filter the data to individual communities, so counties or tract levels. We're going to try to make it so it can include series of tracks as well. And lastly, we have the information, which is going to have all of our sourcing and everything. And then, on the left-hand side, just the general, this is obviously powered by Esri, the ArcGIS app, web dev app. So it's the standard coterie of things that they offer, which is their legend, the ability to print out reports and select tracks. So this is what it looks like currently. It's like I said, it's going to remain remarkably similar, with the main improvements coming from the sourcing and methodology. So we'll see, as we see here, if you would click on the EJ score, you would get this list, which would show you a choropleth of your location. Click on each location and it can show you the more individualized scoring. Over here we have our selection button. Use it to generate reports, which would, obviously select certain tracks. Different reports come up to show you the different effect, or the different levels as compared to the general whole.
And I would add that this is probably the most used feature of the tool. From my experience with working with communities, I think for communities, the most valuable thing is obviously to visualize a map, but to be able to say something about that map in terms of data. And so communities have often come up and said, or anyone doing any analysis have come up and said, how can we just select a small subset of tracts or counties and see the visualization or data for that particular area? So, for instance, we just had a session on the Baltimore County, which has a lot of problems, right? And to just be able to extrapolate the data for Baltimore County and see what's going on there, that's a very commonly used feature that we're trying to, make it more and more better in terms of being able to extract those specific areas and look into them. So just something to add.
Yeah, no, actually, it's a good point too, is that the major benefit of this tool in general is to take these really esoteric and generally complex and not very easily digestible sets of numbers and just put them in a format that any average person can look at it and get information out of it. Because at the end of the day, your average community member is not going to have data science expertise. They're not going to have GIS expertise, but they're going to know what a map is. They're going to know red is bad and not red is better, right? And so just to be able to say, well, I clicked on these tracks and I clicked on these indexes and they all came up red. I can go to my, council member, whomever, and be like, what's the story on this, right? So the way the legend works out on a technical level is it's based off of percentiles, but like I said, it's tried to make it as digestible as possible. So we keep it in terms of quadrants. So we obviously, in terms of the standard deviations of the data sets. The side-by-side mapper, again, is just another tool to help people compare the different variables. As I said earlier, because the big improvement is going to come from the sourcing, it's going to look pretty much the same, just with more updated information. And then I mentioned earlier that we're introducing a filtering tool, which just allows users to filter by a specific geography without having to like click on it, and just to recognize it by name, which is generally how people know their communities in the first place. Do you want to talk about this or should I?
You can if you
Okay.
want. It's fine.
Yeah, so all the work that we've been doing up till now has been on improving the sourcing and the methodology, but that's not what we're going to be stopping on. The end result is to create a tool that's going to have a wider applicability for general users, including being able to incorporate community source data, so the MyBlocks count tool, into it, the real-time air quality data. Another aspect of the Environmental Justice Lab is empowering citizens to use purple air monitors. So in creating that network and importing that network into the MPEJ map, so we can have more accurate and up-to-date and specific air quality monitoring, along with having a dynamic mapping aspect. So this is for the final calculation of the EJ score, is going to be able to be manipulated by users so that they can see how their EJ score would be affected if they removed certain pathogens from their environment. So essentially what it will do is be a dynamic calculation that as you remove variables, it'll update, or add variables, it'll update the EJ score and project that for users. And then lastly, we'll have a contact legislator tool. This one, pretty simple, straightforward API. Well, not even API, it's just a link setup. We have gathered obviously the boundaries for all the legislative districts, including the representatives. Click on the district, it'll give you the number of the representative. Just that simple.
So for the contact the legislator tool, is it just providing the contact information? Oh, okay. So
It will link you to their government website,
I see.
which will have, it will have their phone number and email, but if you
Yeah.
click on the link, it'll send you to their website, which is usually where they have the contact us button, and you can type in your message
That's
there.
very good.
I think it links to our work on the EJ scorecard stuff. If you're familiar with that, we've been working to create an EJ scorecard. We've been working with agencies and kind of, trying to create a scorecard of their efforts in like the environmental justice space. We've been doing that work for a couple of years, and
I think a recent report was
a recent report was published. Yeah, so every year at the end of the year, we kind of we're creating a report with the information we collect on the scorecard, and I think this kind of plugs into that work to bridge the gap between those two efforts. Because at the end of the day, the problem with these mapping tools is that they all have their values, but then they don't connect very well. Like it's all kind of sitting all in isolation, and it's the goal is to connect everything in one place.
The real irony, right, is that in terms of added value to the data, we're not doing much, right? We are literally just collecting data that's already publicly available.
We are doing a lot, but
In terms of value added
for
data,
It's a lot of work.
yeah.
No, that's what I'm saying though, right? Is that
I don't think the rest of the world can appreciate.
exactly.
Like they can just say, "Oh, it's public data. What's a big deal?"
Exactly.
You have people working full time and still not solving all the problems.
Right.
We'll never get there.
But it's hard to communicate. The
Exactly.
scope of the task.
Right. When
Yeah.
you say to somebody the data is available, they instantly think, oh, you have the answer, which is
No.
not really true, right? Like, oh, we have a bunch of numbers, is what we have.
Like we could actually just do a presentation on the data collection and calculations that go behind the tool. Like what we're talking about is the public interface of the tool, but there's a whole other back end, which could be a whole other presentation.
Yeah.
Because it's so complicated. I've been here for a year and a half and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. So anyway.
So then our next steps is as we continue to improve it is we're gonna as we release the beta, hopefully the beta will be out in 2 weeks, and we'll be able to get feedback from stakeholders and do further improvements on the design. And it's going to be one of those projects that's never really going to be 100% finished. There's always going to be things we can do to make it better.
Exactly.
But I think we're very close to the point where it's going to be a really, really helpful tool for communities to use to be able to kind of communicate about their environment better.
So speaking on the topic of like tools, we of course have the EJSCREEN mapper, which is what this presentation was about. But also on the topic of connecting information in one place, we do have other tools, all for the state of Maryland, which are not general EJ scores, but are tailored to specific issues. So one of the tools is the Maryland Park Equity Mapper, which is already out there. We worked to create that with the Department of Natural Resources, and it's about access to or equity and access to green space. And so it creates park equity scores in that tool, which is a pretty good tool to measure like equity in terms of access to green space and such. We have a Maryland Climate and Health Equity Mapper, which is currently under works. It is already published. It's an old tool, but it needs a lot of work. So we're working on doing a completely new revamp of that tool. That would take probably another year, but we do have it. And then a recently created tool was the Maryland Water Equity and Access Mapper. We don't create EJ scores in that. We just kind of put together layers related to water equity mapping. So again, an effort with the Department of Natural Resources where we map swimming, access to the beach, fishing points and such, and then kind of overlap that with social demographic data to figure out who has access to water-related activities in the state. And for this, the mapper is already published. We're working on story maps to show people how they might use a map to make it a valuable tool for them. And then the last one is MyBlock Counts tool, which Eli mentioned earlier. Also another tool that we've recently released, or we're still in the beta version.
It's in beta, right?
But that is at the block level, and it's a crowdsourced data tool that is more like you engage in the tool. So you go on the tool and then you fill in information about the block that you live in, or any block pretty much. And this is our way of going down to that block level and collecting data about pathogenic and salutogenic infrastructure, which is positive and negative features of your block. And the goal is to link up the MyBlock Counts tool to the EJSCREEN tool, which will be interesting because then you'll have probably not the whole state, but parts of the state at the block level, data at the block level. Because ultimately, be it census tracts or even block groups, sometimes EJ communities can be missed because you just didn't collect data at the block level, and there are just blocks sitting there in isolation, having major EJ issues, but just get missed in the larger scheme of things. And the goal is to bridge that gap and give communities a tool that they can use to advocate for themselves. So that is the other tools we have. Applications, I think that people here sitting in a small audience, I think we're all pretty familiar with why EJ tools are useful and necessary. We have used it for educational purposes with communities. We've worked at policies we've attempted to create policies, not necessarily successfully, but we've tried and support decision making. So I think earlier this year and late last year, we were working on developing this legislation. It didn't get passed ultimately, but it did go to the House to identify overburdened communities and support the Justice 40 bill to figure out the investment and where should investments go. So to support this work, we created this map to identify overburdened communities. We had a big group of lots of nonprofits and lots of different people's minds working on this together to identify which indicators should go in there, what should define an overburdened community, what should be the percentile threshold, all of that. Based on that was what we used all of that to create this map. But like I said, the bill didn't pass. That's pretty much it. Yeah. Thank you.
I have a bunch
And then-
of questions.
Yeah.
Questions okay?
Yeah, I think we should do questions now.
We
Yeah.
could but
Yeah.
So, I mean, some of them are pretty easy. Just the, did I hear you say you're using, is Purple the company using air quality monitor?
Yeah.
Purple Air, it's
Yeah.
called.
What's it called?
Purple Air.
Purple Air.
Purple Air.
Purple Air,
It's
okay.
one word, yeah,
Yeah.
Purple Air.
And then, so you've got and then someone can just, like in kind of a citizen science way, I could just put one up in my backyard and that information goes in, or is there like a whole like,
Oh, yeah,
permits and
no,
No, I don't think
options
so.
or something?
I
or-
They're very
don't know.
cheap as well.
Yeah, I don't know if there is a program that would allow you to get them for free, but they are not expensive and they don't.
Like $200, $50.
Not sure.
$800.
If you really want to know, I can actually find out about after the session and get back to you.
They're cheap enough that I know that Dr. Wilson has worked with a lot of communities, churches and the like to set them up
yeah.
on their
And
facility.
that data is flowing into
And
you.
and it doesn't flow, it flows into Purple. Purple, it's all public
So
access.
if you go, they have a website. If you go on the Popular website, they have a mapping. They have like one tab in their website, which is for map or the map. And then if you go there, you'll see where all the popular air indicators, where all the popular air monitors are located. And if you click on that particular monitor, it will give you data for like years.
And then if
and
you
it collects every few minutes or something like that.
it collects every 2 minutes, and then it has there's an API that connects to the Purple Air data, so you can very easily port the data to like live to your maps or whatever tool you want to use, and it all aggregates too. So it's a very cool tool. The only bad thing about it is that the air monitors aren't like that high tech, so they only track P2.5.
Yeah.
Yeah, PM2.5 and PM10 and 1, I believe. Right?
One might not be.
Might not be
I mean,
one.
it might not do one because I know one is the harder one.
Because I know Dr. Wilson's working with Acclima, and Acclima does.
Right.
The full spectrum.
Aclima's, at another level, yeah.
Okay, so this is more basic PM.
Yeah, and Aclima's sensors are very expensive comparatively.
Yeah.
They are very high tech, they're much smaller, much easier to install, has less needs. Yeah, right, but then that's Aclima's sensor, which is, harder to access and use. Not use, but harder to access in the sense of affordability. If in terms of like collecting more data, I think that Purple Air monitors have been more spread out.
Yeah, in terms of equitability too, it's a lot better to have
Exactly.
a cheaper, more like efficient model in that sense.
Yeah.
Right. But that.
You're
So and then by the like all the EJ scores, have you done or have you considered doing it by state legislative districts?
That is
So-
in the works. Dr. Wilson really wants to do that. I think once we get the tracks properly done, then we're going to move on to the next case. And I think legislative might be the first one that we do.
So I would love that because that's exactly we're trying to do green jobs by state legislative districts. The data is really terrible. Actually, but the problem is the same. But I'd love to talk more.
So
You should commit, like we should exchange emails or something.
Yeah.
Our emails are there, but also
yeah,
we have cards.
I could just find you on the internet, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
so-
exactly.
On the community, so the thing with the EJ scores is we calculate them on a tract level, and then because of how, I'm sure, as you know, the boundaries of the data that we collect doesn't always comport. So as we zoom out, we get less accurate, just in terms of having to geographically weight the variables rather than use the geography they were assigned to, which is why legislative districts are going to be like the last thing we kind of calculate, because we have to do it for every step. Like I think zip code, and then we're going to do legislative districts, but it's the same process. We just geographically weight the score from the tract, so on.
Yeah, that's fun. It's great. And then last question is
Yeah, you're fine.
on the My Block Counts tool.
You want to show it?
Are people here's my sub questions.
Yeah.
But
I
are
mean, this is a
people
workshop
using it?
session, so you're.
And it seems also like it seems amazing, and I've heard so much that we want like community driven information. We want micro, hyper local data. At the same time, there's also like it's tricky. I mean, suddenly I go in and say my block is terrible. There's consequences to that. That could affect real estate. Anyway, just like it's a whole to getting to like kind of
You mean
crowdsource
the
data.
consequences in the community, right?
Yeah, if I say I smell chemicals in the air all the time, my property, I say that, and you're my neighbor, your property value is
Well,
going
it's
down,
anonymous. It's anonymous.
But I still said it about, so you don't know who said it, but someone
Someone
said it
did, yeah.
about our neighborhood.
Right.
And it's, I mean, and I'm not saying that, I just,
Oh, yeah,
just
no,
curious if
definitely.
what kind of challenges like this come up, because there's a lot of interest in, it's actually the Bezos Earth Fund and the city of Baltimore, and Baltimore's chief data officer want to do like data ownership models, and there's just a lot of interest in this area.
Oh,
But I'm
yeah.
just curious of how many people, how many people have used it, and then what, good and bad, or, whatever, what are some of the issues that have come up?
We had a session on Thursday. Did you attend the virtual sessions at all? We had a virtual session about EJ tools on Thursday, which I was moderating. I wasn't speaking. Dr. Wilson, others from the EJSCREEN, and some other people who work on this stuff were talking about this topic, not about necessarily a tool, but generally as EJ tools. And that is a question I think an audience member asked. And I'm just telling you this because this is something someone said. Someone asked about this, like, what about the negative consequences of this kind of information for the community? And their example was that, say you have a bad block or a bad tract or a bad neighborhood, it could bring down property property taxes, and that kind of stuff. Have you thought about that? And the answer that one of the speakers, I think it was Dr. Wilson, actually said that, sure, there must be, but at this point, like, having this work and having this kind of information is so much more meaningful, and the intention of doing something good is so much stronger than at this point just like getting it done and having it out there for people to use is just more important in this time and place than like going into that right now, I think. And I don't know if you agree or disagree. I don't know if I agree or disagree, but that is what they said. Just
It's super interesting.
No, to build off of that, though, I think the other thing to consider too is the inherent value of your environment, right? So if we're taking in a big picture or even a granular picture of your environment and you see negative aspects of it, that contributes, though negatively, to the value of your environment, whether or not you realize it like beforehand, right? So even though this information might reduce property values or taxes or the like, it doesn't necessarily change the value of the land itself, because regardless of how much you pay for your property taxes, you're still dealing with pathogens in your environment, right? So it's kind of like, at least in my perspective, I feel it's kind of a moot point in that, like, if you live on top of a landfill, doesn't matter if your house is worth $500,000, right? That's kind of the way I think about it, at least.
Yeah.
Looks like all mapping is political.
Right.
In and of itself. So,
inherently, yeah.
but at least you have the data, right?
Yeah.
Like the more important movement is to have the data and then have the political discussion about it.
The implications of it. Exactly. Yeah.
And also, like, I think, at least in terms of this conversation, the focus was on EJ, and I feel like, to some degree, of course, like, EJ is a political problem, and having the data to talk about that is just the starting point, and I feel like we just, that's just important. So what happens with that? Who knows? But
Yeah, not to get too overly political, but there is a need to have a shared sense of reality, right? That's very pronounced, and having objective data is not the be all and end all of it at all. But it is a nice way to say, there is this, you might think that, but there is this.
someone might listen.
Right?
I'm interested to see what questions you put in there.
Oh, in the MyBlock counts.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just real quick, because you mentioned the community surveying, this is the MyBlock Counts tool that we're building. It's built off of another Esri tool, so that's why the linkage is going to be really seamless and allow us to kind of put it in. So basically what it does is just real quick overview. It's just a community survey about the different physical aspect features of their neighborhood, along with policing, health, and environmental aspects. So just quickly going to run through it. It just kind of shows what the block is, asks very general questions about the geography. I'm just going to scroll through real quick. And then,
A lot of questions.
yeah.
It is, yeah.
So it gets really granular. The only required question is the geography.
Location.
The location, yeah. So the otherwise,
Is that the phone, or they have to click through and tell you?
It will do that, but you can also, if you don't want to share your
Manually
address, you can type it in here, and it will track either way. And you also don't have to complete the survey in order to send it in, which is really important, because survey fatigue is like really bad.
Yeah,
So
there's a lot of questions, yeah.
Yeah.
Also, some of it might not be relevant to some people, you know, like.
Industry.
Yeah, right. Like, if you don't
Yeah.
live near a brownfield, like, what does it matter? Yeah, so this will just ask these general buckets of questions. There's another small bucket of just like general information. Then you hit submit. That information then gets sent, and then it's all publicly available to all the other users of the MD EJSCREEN. So the goal is, as we collect more and more data, we get a more complete picture, like on the minute level, for everybody, to kind of like glean more information about their locality.
Here's a question that I have though.
Shoot.
If I just went on the tool, would I know what all spots people have collected data?
If you go on the MD EJ,
If I go on this tool, I can't see anything, right?
no, currently no.
And then on EJSCREEN, would you aggregate the data that you're collecting here, like into
Yes.
a census tract or into a legislative?
Yeah, so it's gonna what happens. So it gets transferred via SQL, SQL, depending on your persuasion, to the Arc server that we have set, and then yeah, it'll disaggregate the information in terms of the fields set. It is limited by geography, and that the tool can be used nationally. So if you go onto the link from the tool, you can use it in California. The data won't show up on ours because it's Maryland focused.
Esri's running it, or you're running it?
It's
You're running it, but you don't care.
yeah. Well, like, so Esri, yeah, we're running it, but it's an Esri platform, so it works internationally because it's built off of their
Awesome.
stats.
We're about to be done though.
But we host it on our servers. So
And do you have a sense of you? Are you getting users?
we just released the beta yesterday.
Yesterday, yeah.
So we're collecting feedback. I have a lot of work to do next week. I got some really great feedback, so I'm not mad about it.
It's on UX type stuff.
Yeah, UX type stuff.
Also language, like someone said, can you translate it in another language?
Oh yeah.
Which is something you hadn't considered. So.
Yeah, which is a huge.
I mean, yeah, Spanish
Right.
at least.
I said at the very least, right? Yeah. So I have flashbacks. I used to work at my local library, and I would get into fights with my colleagues over why we didn't have translated materials.
Yeah.
And like, oh, I forgot. Yeah, so I have a lot of UX stuff to work on, but the data is pretty much going to just stay as what it is. There's a few questions we're going to be adding, but
Minute.
yeah, very minute. Because the idea, obviously, is that we want community members to be able to have a clean grasp of the information. That's all.
And this is also one of the themes of like what we've been thinking about is like, so there's all these state level EJSCREENs, and they all kind of do their own thing, and they should. I mean, that's part of the, because there's the national EPA one.
Exactly.
But still, like, there seems like there would be, so like, this looks like you're already well on the way to share it. And so you could, now just tell California, hey, what the heck? Like at this point, they can do it, or something, right? So that's amazing because it just seems like there's opportunities for sharing things,
Right.
right? And then again, is the bootstrap EJSCREENs and the governments don't want to do it. Suddenly, these features, could be then.
I don't
affordable to others to
Yeah.
that because I think EJSCREENs are in 20 states or something.
Is it even penny?
Somewhere in there. It's
Okay.
a fair bit.
That's more
But
than
there's
I thought.
another.
Yeah, that is more than I thought
At
like
least
10.
half don't have it.
Yeah.
And that's the half where it's probably more needed. So
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Like the deep south.
Yeah.
And stuff like that.
Mississippi, Louisiana.
Yeah,
Louisiana is a mess.
but yeah.
No, I'm just curious about the EJ legislation. I don't know it very well, but I wonder what the requirements are in terms of dissemination and sharing, because their methodology is not terribly
when you say, are you talking federal or Maryland?
federal.
Oh.
Yeah, I have no clue. So I'm just kind of thinking in the back of my
With the
head.
legislation information I shared in the presentation, we were trying to get MD EJSCREEN to become the official tool to make decisions about the Justice 40 investment, and that didn't pass. And it's difficult. And in fact, the other session I was referring to, which was on Thursday about EJ tools, we had someone from New Jersey. She's a professor at NY New School, but she is originally from New Jersey. Dr. Anna Baptista. I don't know if you've come across her, but she was saying that in New Jersey they didn't have any tool or anything, but they passed some legislation about how for permitting purposes, like they wouldn't permit them to locate or permit certain industries or facilities to get permitted unless they met certain criteria, but they didn't specify anything. So then that legislation created a need for a tool to be there, right? So that's the other side of things. So yeah, each state is doing its own thing, but some have other stories.
I do wonder if since there are so many statewide ones, whether isn't a network. It seems like it would be a pretty easy thing to put together.
Well, I remembered something that Dr. Wilson said in the session on Thursday, I think, that each...
The same one I'm talking about, I think.
Yeah, the same one, yeah. Each state or each area should come up with its own tool because they know better what locally specific indicators and things that are most important. So maybe the format and the shape of it could be similar, but they would have to
standardize, yeah.
They couldn't really, they could take your methodology and how you're collecting the data and the back end and everything, but they would have to choose all the indicators.
But clearly, wildfires isn't a huge issue in Maryland. I don't know,
Right.
but, it's the issue.
Exactly.
But the tools, you're doing these spatial aggregation things, and everyone has that. A lot of the back end stuff that's not you're not even talking about now, but you're spending a lot of time on.
Yeah.
Is where the other folks have the same.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
you could write a paper on that
from
too.
this to there, and everyone has to get from this to there somehow.
You could write a paper on that.
We should have a paper on just the how to create challenges and pitfalls and I don't know, something mapping tools.
Yeah,
Not
You
really
could outline the process enough.
right. Yeah, if you because at the end of the
There are
Same.
papers about EJSCREEN, and Cal EnviroScreen has 4 papers, right? But it's always about their methodology, very structured methodology.
Things
Exactly, it's hitting all the points, right? We did this right, we did this, and then we did this. But what all could you not do, or what all did you struggle to do? That's not in there.
no, it is not.
And that's the information that folks need, I think.
Because you've seen the Justice 40, they have that.
The CJST too.
That tool is totally publicly available.
Oh,
so
yeah.
we've been playing with that. But that's effectively a paper, even though it's not just because they show every step, and so you get to see behind
Right.
the scenes.
Right.
And there's crazy stuff in there. Even though, they're very good, but there's just what did happen? But that's inevitable.
Yeah.
Kind of crazy stuff, and then you have to take it with a grain of salt sometimes, what's going on.
Exactly.
Or come up with something better.
Well, like we said earlier, a lot of this stuff was publicly available from federal databases, right? So if you do kind of make that methodology standardized, and now I'm just trying to think of a program like this. It's not a bad idea. That would save a lot of people a lot of time.
And maybe make it easier, or maybe encourage them to think of creating a mapping tool.
Yeah,
The other
could be
thing-
adding indicators that you have that they don't have.
That they don't
that are paying
have,
the money.
yeah.
But
Exactly.
you
And
did
vice
the work,
versa.
and so that now they still have to get their data, but
Exactly.
I think just plug and play.
Yeah. The other thing that would be I don't know if all the screen tools could be combined for the entire country, but it would be interesting to just have a map of the US where all the states that do have a mapping tool are highlighted, and if you just click on that state, it
You get
links
that,
you to the tool of that state, right? Because right now, folks even don't you know about this stuff, so there are 20 states with mapping tools. If I asked a random person, they wouldn't know anything. But if they saw 20, exactly, but if they saw a map with 20 states colored, they would know that, oh wow, an EJ tool is not some crazy concept that I just came up with. It's being used by 20 states, which is not half, but it's somewhere there. So, and I feel like that should be very simple.
Yeah, that wouldn't be
Someone
hard.
with a basic knowledge of coding and GIS, intro GIS class.
Yeah, somebody with an intro to GIS course would definitely be able to do
Should
that.
be easy.
It would
Just
be.
linking all the things and creating a nice looking map.
Well, great work, guys.
Thanks.
It was really nice talking to you as well.
Yeah, this is great.
Yeah, I mean, if you have more questions, you can ask us.
I'll look you up and then I'll send you.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
I don't think I'm actually in there. No, I am.
You are, you're Eli, right?
Yeah, they put me in there.
Anushi and Eli.
We did.
Can I go home now?
You've been here a long time.
Right, yeah, true.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
guys.